Welcome to the Driving Standard Podcast with your hosts, Matt Bono.
And I know for a fact, actually I don't, I am sure,
Mike Smith.
It's like an S&M dungeon for cars back there.
And Bryan Baca.
Mullet Man over here has it.
Welcome everybody to the Driving Standard. My name is Matt Bono. I'm joined here with Mike Smith and Bryan Baca. And guys, Series 1, Episode 1.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
This is exciting. This is cool. If you haven't already listened, make sure you check out last week's introduction episode where we covered kind of more of our background, what we drive, where we're coming from, and then what to expect from the show. I'm going to give you a quick rundown just for those who missed it. You know, we're all car guys, whether it's a hot rod or a hot hatch. We've driven pretty much everything. We have some racing background, some gearhead background, and this show is for just anybody who loves driving. So if you work on cars, if you don't, if you're a mom who is like dreaming of the day that her kids move out and you can buy a Miata and just blast through the California sun with the top down, to the guys who are working on their Lincoln Continentals from the 60s, like this is for everybody. You don't even have to have a car to enjoy this show. So welcome. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you stick with us because we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about on the show.
So today on the show, we're going to be discussing what everyone's discussing right now. Unless you've been living under a rock or on a space station or in some other way indisposed, you have at least seen pictures of the new Corvette C8. And regardless of what you think of it, it is the most talked about vehicle out there right now. And today we're going to dive into a little bit. We'll talk about the specs. We'll talk about what it looks like, how it performs, and whether or not it really represents what a Corvette is to the American car buyer and to their target market.
It seems to have just taken the internet by storm. And like we kind of talked about, I think, during the introduction episode, I don't see anybody who doesn't like this car.
Yeah, there's an amazing amount of love being thrown at it. And spoiler alert, we may be the one show that's not throwing all the love at the Corvette C8, but we'll get into that.
Let's dive right into it. So I'm going to start this question for Bryan. Bryan's our tech guy. Mike's our drive everything fast guy, and I'm kind of in the middle. So Bryan, let's start the show off with you. What to you is a Corvette?
To me, somebody says Corvette, I'm looking for a 50s, 60s classic. You know, I'm like, oh, where's it at? You know, but then I turn around and it's that ugly 70s thing that my son's like, Dad, look at that. What is that thing? And I'm like, oh, yeah, don't worry about that one, dude.
Yeah. That's reserved for wrestlers and
80s films with Uzis and stuff like that.
Right. Guys who just are always oily for some reason, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Are there certain features to you that you look for in a Corvette?
I'm not a big fan of a lot of the new vets. Yeah. Like, they brought out the new Stingray, and pretty cool looking. I was kind of looked at them, but everybody's got one. So it's just like, oh, look, another Stingray. You know? Yeah. That's a cool color.
Right. So out of all the generations, would you say C1, that first like 53 through I think 60 is when they extended?
Yeah. I'd say mine is the Stingray hatchback split window.
Okay,
one.
So like the 60s.
Yeah.
Like the best year that cars were built ever of all time, Mike, who's not paying attention.
Those...
Yeah,
those ones were the ones that I like.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see when somebody says vet.
So the classic.
Yeah. I mean, I just mainly look for the one with the rear split window. Yeah. That one's like just one of my favorites.
And here's the worst story about the split window Corvette. When they came out, people hated the blind spot that the split created. And so they would take it to a body shop and have the split cut out and the coupe window put in and completely devalue that car. Can you believe that?
That's a weird blind spot, I guess.
Right. Well, it was right in the middle of their rear view mirror for them.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it really falls in line with, now you can't see out the back of the vehicle at all on the C8. So I guess, they're just expanding on that.
Reliving the old days.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'd imagine they're going to have sensors, lane sensors and all that that will just tell you you're not going to hit anything.
Right.
So then, Mike, I'm going to shift this to you. What to you is the Corvette? What is there a ratio? Is there a year that speaks to you?
All right, so This is the problem for me. I hate the Corvette. I've always hated the Corvette. The original Corvettes were fine because they were still 60s cars. They were still 60s roadsters. And I'm not denigrating anyone that loves the Corvette. It's their car. It just never was mine. I always looked at it and I thought the sweeping lines in the 70s were kind of cheesy. I thought the car got more and more cheesy as it moved in the 80s and 90s. I'm the rare guy that when the C7 came out, I went, there's an automobile. That's a Corvette I'd drive. I love it, right? Now, that's an unpopular opinion. I don't care. But for me, that car suddenly had the right look. And I had always thought of a Corvette as a muscle car, essentially. It's a sports car, but it was competing, with the other brand manufacturers in the United States. They were all muscle cars. And they, for better or for worse, that was kind of where that competitive angle lied between those auto manufacturers. So I always thought of the Vet as, front engine, big horsepower, manual shift, lighten up the rear tires and all the fun,
Right.
Then the C7 comes along and I really thought, man, that looks like a racing machine on the road. That is something else. So when the C8 came along, I was kind of like, well, what are you doing?
Right.
You just got done hitting the mark I wanted.
Just got that ratio that you were looking for.
It.
Right.
For me,
Right.
That's,
no, of course.
Obviously, I'm not speaking for everybody here, but to me, that's what a Corvette is.
Right.
It's a big power front engine cross between a muscle car and a sports car.
Right.
With an American nameplate.
For me, the C7 was okay. I felt like they took too many style cues from other cars, particularly the Viper in the front.
Sure.
I loved the C6. That was my go-to Corvette. I felt like the proportions were correct. It was very distinctly Corvette. There was nothing else that they copied from. They had the Targa top.
Sure.
When I look for a Corvette, I look for round tail lights. And that's when the C6 to C7 kind of transitioned from the more traditional round tail light to, more the square rounded off edge with the open top that we see in the C7. V8 in the front. I know the Corvette didn't start that way, but I do like the big muscle in the front. It's that proper gentleman's car, the touring car where you have your power in the front and you put it to the rear. I also really like the pop hood that go forward.
To be fair, you're a little bit biased because you're the only guy I know that took a Jeep Wrangler and cut in old round tail lights.
That is true. Yeah.
Just for the look.
I don't know what it is, and that is always a weakness of mine, whether it's been the GTR, the Skyline.
The Maxima.
I didn't hate it. I'm not gonna lie. There's just something about a round tail light. You see it on Ferraris.
I don't disagree.
You see it on vintage cars, and the TJ I felt was just missing that. All right, let's start diving into this. So the big thing, and I think why the internet has just lost its mind, everybody immediately saw what GM was going to ask for this thing, and it came in. It said starting at $60,000. And Mike, you brought up a great point on the last introduction episode that now it is going to be competing against cars that traditionally the Corvette would not be competing against.
What this price gets you, if it is everything that Chevy advertises, is you're getting a mid-engine American supercar at $60,000. Now, whether or not you're actually going to see that hit the road for $60,000 and what options are there that you're not going to see when you actually pick yours up from the dealership. But by all accounts, you're getting a 495 horsepower mid-engine dual clutch superb sports car that can compete with some of the best mid-engine stuff out there, compete with anything out there.
Absolutely.
To be quite frank.
Yeah. You do get a lot, like you said, and for those who aren't familiar with the Corvette, which I'm sure everybody is, this is the first mid-engine Corvette. This thing has been teased since almost the beginning of the car.
This has been rumored since the beginnings
of
50
the years. 50 years now.
It's going on forever.
Right.
My entire lifetime, certainly, they've been talking about, will there be a mid-engine Vet? When will there be a mid-engine Vet? There's a mid-engine Vet. The internet went insane. And then to find out that starting at $60K, that's mind-blowing.
Well,
the Shelby GT500, $74,000
Exactly.
for the same, design of car.
Right.
So
They're comparing this to the GT500 a lot too. I've been seeing, and I'm like, the price difference is huge.
price difference is huge, and they're completely different, automobiles now.
Right.
It used to make more sense to compare the two, but now I'm looking at them. You're talking about a mid-engine sports car versus what the Shelby has always been, which is,
It's pure muscle. And so I kind of
Enormous
want to go
muscle.
back to what you were talking about with the Corvette as, it's always been seen as a muscle car to you. I come from the other side of that, from the drag racing, and half shafts are one of the worst things you can drag race with.
Sure.
So I never did look at the Corvette as a real good option for a drag car. Now, there are people who do it all the time, and they can put down some serious power, especially the later the model. But putting the GT500, which I think now is also a half-shaft independent suspension car, against the Vette, normally I just look at that and I go, you're comparing a pony car to a sports car. And now, not even just a sports car that is on the brink of becoming a supercar.
Yeah, it's a completely different genre to
Right.
me. And that is, and we'll get into part of this, that is to me part of what this C8 left behind for Corvette is, any semblance of it being an American front engine superpower. Now it's trying to move into supercar territory. I almost rather they would have put a different nameplate on it, to be completely honest.
I agree with that 100%. I don't think it could have been something like the Corsair, obviously.
Right.
But
Yeah, shocking.
Yeah.
move for the Corsair.
But think about the nameplates for the Corvette over the years. You have Stingray being the most popular one. You have Grand Sport. They could have found something else.
To differentiate it a little bit, maybe.
And GM has already made up their mind on this, but could a front-engine Corvette been sold alongside of a mid-engine Corvette?
I don't think it could have been sold alongside and made enough profit to make it worthwhile. So much R&D
Right.
has to go into both of those models.
That's a good point.
I just don't think it'd be realistic for any auto manufacturer to pour out those kind of resources in hopes that they're going to get a return on their investment.
Right.
But then, what do they have the Camaro for?
I think
I thought that was supposed to be the Mustang's little rival there, and then the Vette was always the
Right.
next step up from those.
Well, Bryan brings up a really good point. The buyer for the Corvette, the average age was 65 years old, okay? These guys grew up with the Z28 Camaro, right?
Right.
And so what happens are, and I know they built this Corvette to appeal to a new customer base. GM has been very upfront about that from the start.
Sure.
Is that buyer who is now 60 to 65 years old, who grew up with the muscle car and the pony cars and saw all that in real life, are they actually going to jump ship to a higher performance Camaro because they love that ratio of big power in the front sent to the rear via a manual transmission instead of something that's paddle shift and is hard to get into?
Yeah. Or would they leave the manufacturer entirely and go to a Mustang?
Right.
That'd be sacrilege for many of them. But yeah, I wonder about it. I don't know.
Because Corvette fans are die-hard Corvette
Of course.
fans. These guys, when they buy one, they've bought... There's guys who have one generation of each Corvette in their garage right now.
Of course.
Are they going to stick with the brand? Probably.
Those guys are not who this matters for. Those guys are buying that Corvette regardless of what it looks like when it comes out. They've bought every one, and they're going to continue to buy them, or they've owned several generations of Vette. It's not going to matter. They're buying a Vette, right? What you're looking for now, and I think the C8 kind of harkens to this, is you're looking for the kids that are growing up now that no longer care about the tradition and the mystique of the Corvette. They may not have even grown up with it on their walls.
Right.
You just want to sell them that car.
Right.
And that car, as we discussed a little bit in the last episode about auto manufacturers marketing to their audience, this car, again, kind of says, look, this is what the kids want, and this is what the kids are going to get. We're
Right.
getting rid of the rear tail light, the
Right.
round rear tail lights. We're going to a, something that looks like an Aventador on the back end. You know what I mean?
Right, but at the same time, and this is what I think what bothers me most about what GM executives have said. If you read what they say in Road and Track, they say, we're targeting to a new target market. We're going after the young generation who say that they see mid-engine cars as a better value or better performance than the front-engine car. But then at the same time, in the same sentence, they'll say, but we're keeping the price at $60 to appeal to our current customer base. And it feels a little bit like they're trying to I
Ride the
understand.
fence.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and maybe this isn't the right place to say this, but let me say, as harsh as I'm going to be on the C8, I look at that car and go, God, for $60,000, that is an amazing
It's a
machine.
steal.
I'm just not even going to pretend
No,
like that's
absolutely.
not an amazing. I got a lot of problems with it, but I'm not going to pick on anybody for picking that thing up for $60,000 as a dealership.
Absolutely not. As car guys, we didn't talk about this in the introduction episode, but I will say there's not one car that I don't like. I think you can find a good thing about every car.
I agree.
Oh, that's
No,
a challenge.
I
and the
understand.
gauntlet
I
is
totally get it.
down.
I have had cars that I hate, but there's still one thing that they are good at, or a type of person that they should appeal to.
Sure.
And I think the Corvette, not only is it going to appeal to everybody, as we see, just by how crazy the internet is going, but I think there's a lot more good than bad. So although you'll hear my dialogue be a little bit more critiquing, at the end of the day, if someone pulled up in one and said, hey, you want to go for a spin? Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
1,000%.
You think the old timers at the car shows that have the older ones are gonna? Oh, great! Here comes the C8
Sneer
rolling
at
in.
it like new money.
No, no, but I do think you'll see one of those stupid little car show kids that has his face buried into his arms, leaning up against one of those new C8s.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what old guys do. I'm like, why? That's creepy. Why are you doing that?
I don't think that anybody is going to look at that car and be like, what a pile of...
No way.
But,
No way.
I'm coming at it from the perspective of, is this a vet? Does this represent what a vet is? And is it worthy of all the hype and all the love that's being thrown at it? It's like you say, you can find something good about every car.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a lot of real bad things you can pick out about cars, just about any car, you know what I mean? So I don't want to whitewash the C8 like everyone else is. Like, man, this thing's going to be amazing on every level. And it's like, well, there's still some things I really don't like about, especially from a looks and,
Right.
ergonomic perspective.
I do think I tend to, when a car comes out, I think I tend to listen to what people say. And if everybody goes one way, even, all bad, all good, I tend to just immediately go skeptical.
Right.
I don't like having that narrative pushed. I want to hear both sides of this argument, and I have not heard one negative thing. And I think that's almost what drives me to be super skeptical about this and to look at things and go, all right, is this really the best car that's ever been built?
Yeah. I try to think, well, I don't want to just, am I just being a contrarian to be a contrarian?
Right.
But that's not, I know that's not what it was, because my visceral reaction the first time I saw the car unveiled was like, no.
Yeah, I agree.
You
It
know?
was underwhelming for
Can't
me.
help it.
Right.
It's just the way I felt.
If I would have seen that on the road, I would have never thought, hey, look, there's a Corvette.
Yeah,
I would have
right.
been like, what is that thing?
Right.
Is that McLaren or a new Ferrari or something like that? I would never.
And you watch some of the media stuff on it, even some of the YouTube videos that are released to, YouTubers that are, let's be frank, those are media pieces, puff pieces. They talk about, we left that sharp nose, that shark nose to make sure it's a vet. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, well, you just had to tell me that. I
Right.
didn't look at it and go, that's a vet.
Exactly.
You told me that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I said this in the introduction episode. I'm going to try not to keep comparing to the Supra, and I don't know why I keep trying to bring them back together. But I do feel like if you look at the side profile of the Supra, like the lines are the exact same as the original Supra. The headlights play into it. The taillights play into it. The logo that they used is all the same font from the old Supra.
Right.
And I look at the Vet, and I'm like, all the heritage is gone. That said, Supra is the old recipe for success. Corvette has just rebranded itself after 60, 70 years,
Right.
almost 70 years.
Right.
It's now rebranded itself as a new model. So
And
the history's gone.
The Supra doesn't have 60 years.
No,
You know what I mean?
I'll disagree with that in the sense that the Supra was originally designed to be built off the 2000 GT, which was a car from the 60s, late 60s, and then was brought back, obviously, in the 90s, in the 80s, then brought back in the 90s, and then brought back now in the 2000s.
Right, but I don't think it's fighting with its old heritage.
It does hurt my heart that GM has just tossed their history to the side.
Right.
I hate to say it.
That may be kind of what my initial reaction
Right.
to it. And everything. Even as not a Corvette fan, as I said.
Right.
But I expected a Corvette. and I saw that car and I went, that's not a Corvette. Hey, we're just going to completely reinvent the wheel, slap Corvette on it,
Right.
and say that's what it is.
Now, in GM's defense, one multi-billion-dollar company, they know more than we do. They test all their demographics.
Well, they certainly know more than we do. They've got all our money.
Right. But the other side of that is I felt the exact same way when the Dodge Charger came out. I looked at that and I said, there's nothing Charger about it. It's a four-door family car with a V8.
Still feel that way about the Charger.
Well, for me, they remedied that by bringing out the Challenger, giving us the Hellcat, giving us the Demon. I still feel like we need a CUDA if you're listening, Dodge.
Yes. The Charger
That'd be
comes
sweet.
out, I look at it, and then I saw police cruisers,
Right.
Made out of Chargers, and I thought, that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Chevy Lumina. Cool.
Yeah.
Then the Challenger came out, and I was like, oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But here's the
that's
thing,
it.
is that Charger was a huge success that brought Chrysler back from bankruptcy. That Charger changed the game, brought in more money and loyalty to the brand, and was probably picked apart by car guys like us going, that's not a Charger, that's not a Charger. But
Sure.
you know what? It was a financial success, and the C8 will be the exact
And we've
same.
talked about this a little bit with Dodge, not to dive too deep into that, but one of the things that Dodge picked up on in the 90s and has carried on ever since is they were the first one to start retro styling their trucks and their cars
Right.
to harken back to stuff from the 60s and
Right.
50s. They were the first one to start dropping the hoods down over the sides to kind of mimic those fenders and things like
Right.
that.
Yep.
And then they've played off of that. If GM wanted to do that with the Vet, this is not the way to do it. The way to do it is to introduce something that goes back to the Stingray and really looks like a Stingray.
right.
You know what I mean? And I think you could have done that with a mid-engine car and made people go like, "Oh my, that looks like a Stingray that
Yeah,
they just made a
right.
mid-range."
I agree.
And I don't think they did that.
Right. And if you listen to what the car they based it on and all their testing, they say the baseline was a Ferrari 458. And I'm like, no shit. Like, you can tell. You might as well just photocopy that car, Sure. I want to talk about what 60,000 gets you. That gets you staggered wheels, 19s in the front, 20s in the back. That gets you a limited slip, parking sensors and a rear camera, push-button start, leather on the seats and the steering wheel. You have a digital instruments with a touch screen. You have power seats, dual climate control, and then Wi-Fi and a Bose audio system. So for $60K, think about that. I mean, all those features are more found in the $80,000 price range. If I read that list and said that's from Cadillac, you would automatically go, well, that's a $100,000 SUV. That's the Escalade,
Yeah.
right? So all that for 60.
And I will, I disagree a little bit in the sense that like that list of features is something that's, reserved for the $80,000 price range. Now the tech that's going into, a $30,000 car or truck is shocking what
Right.
you can get if you're buying the higher sticker price model, right? Now what I will say is they're not nickel and diming you. They're giving you all the comfort, all the creature comforts up front.
Right.
And they're not saying, oh, you can have a backup camera for that unbelievable blind spot behind you, but you got to bump up to the $70,000 version. They're not doing that to you, and I appreciate that.
I will say, though, you also, on the other side of that, you're not getting any sort of a performance package until you get to the Z51 package. And then you get magnetically controlled suspension, performance traction management, better exhaust. You'll get engine output increased by a little bit. You'll also have a limited slip that is electronically controlled, a rear spoiler, a front spoiler, high-performance tires, and a better cooling system to cool the engine. For $60K, they're saying you get a car that does 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I don't know about that. And the reason why is I feel like the numbers we're getting might be closer to that Z51 performance package.
I kind of feel like, you've got all these, you've got the rear spoiler, the front spoiler, and all of the performance additions to the car. I feel like, does that mean I'm going to get a $60,000 version out on the road and it's going to be squirrely and it's not going to handle the way I want it to? It's going to be a more difficult beast to drive. Do I need all of these performance features in order to make this a real high performance car that I can drive and feel confident driving and not concerned about, I guess.
Are you going to feel confident driving a C8 and the fact that you're 6'5" and the car is probably really small?
We'll get into that in the interior.
I can only imagine how great you'll look.
Hate me.
No, but this does bring up a good point. Before we change segments, I do want to talk about this. Do you think there will be price creep like we saw with the Nissan GTR, where it started out at $75,000? Everybody lost their mind on how great of a car it was, hand-built engine, all-wheel drive, turbo, and then now it's a $80,000, now it's a $90,000, now it's a $120,000 car.
I have to admit to my own ignorance on what the past shows us with the Corvette line. I don't know. Has that happened in the past with the Corvette?
It has not. If you actually look at what the car cost back in the 60s and 70s, it was in line with housing prices and people's salary, and the Corvette has stayed in that exact same price point every year after year after year.
So I'd say we'd have to trust history and assume that they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if the GTR had if there was any reference point to assume they were going to do that or not. I know that was kind of a shock to people. It started here, and now it's climbing through the roof.
People, I think, did expect it with the Nismo. They knew that package was coming out. Of course, it was going to be a lot more. It was significantly more.
Now, here's my hot take on that. I don't think that'll happen with the Corvette, and I know we're not talking about the Supra, but we keep coming back to it. You can bet your sweet noogie that TRD edition of that Toyota is going to be insane.
It is, and I was so excited. Just yesterday, they were interviewing one of the executives from Toyota, and they said this car's going to get some serious performance packages, and I'm kind of holding out for that.
And you're going to pay for them.
Absolutely.
But you'll be nice. You'll be out driving on the road, and you'll be like, vet. Oh, look, a Supra. Yeah.
Exactly.
Vet.
That's right. Yep. That's right. Here's a prediction that we can put in the time capsule and later on pull out and go, what a tool.
Yeah.
The Supra is going to cost more for anything remotely approaching the kind of performance that you'll get out of a Corvette. It'll cost $30,000 more. And I will also say that I bet Corvette will not have a model that tops out above what Toyota Supra's models will reach. I think the Supra TRD edition with every performance modification you could ask for from the factory is going to end up costing $20,000 more than the top possible Vet you could buy from them and put on the road.
I say their numbers are pretty close right now, aren't they? Like number-wise?
Yeah, their price point is within $5,000 between the first edition launch for the Supra and the base model Corvette.
And then the Supra was coming in at like 45.
Supra starts at 48 for the intro. Okay. You can get a premium, which just has some more interior stuff. The performance isn't any different. That comes in at 52 or 51. And then the first year launch edition is sitting at 55. However, dealerships are selling them right now at 100, just because everybody is freaking out over.
Sure, and that's my point. I think is that I think it's easier for Corvette to keep the price down because your market share is bigger. Once you get to a Supra, you've got guys that want that car and they want it the way they want it, and they're willing to just open up the vault to get what it is.
The two things I think both cars have going for them. One, I think with the Supra, everybody said, well, it's never going to produce the power that the 2JZ did, because back in the day you could get 1,200 horsepower out of them. I disagree with that. And I'm already, you already look at the motor and the numbers it's putting out, and it's higher than what Toyota says it's going to be. It's doing a 0 to 60 faster than Toyota said it was going to do. I think when modders get their hand on it, that it is going to be a car that they can make extremely fast.
Sure.
In the Corvette's favor, that will also be the case for the guys who do things like the Texas Mile, but especially companies like Hennessy. If you look at like what they've done in the past, when they get their hands on a Vet, that thing's going to be insane.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think you're going to see some pretty shocking track numbers out of it. I don't think there's been any sort of actual hard numbers released for Nürburgring or anything like that.
No, I haven't seen any test numbers really.
So, do you think they did this design I know they race. What are the series they race in all the time on TV?
The GT3 is what they run.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, do you think they did this to try and keep up or move up into a different class on those races?
The C6 was already sort of dominant for a while in that. Well, maybe not dominant, but it was highly competitive, and I know it.
Yeah.
It won some GT series for several years there. So I don't think that necessarily drove the decision making behind this. I think maybe, if anything, it was more of a trying to reinvent the brand and create a new audience for it that they didn't have before.
Okay, you don't think it's like on the racing side against some of these
No,
other cars?
I don't. So I will say this with the race car, specifically the racing Corvette. Pratt & Miller is the company that builds that car. And although it does have GM components, of course, obviously, these guys are known for, like, engineering, designing, and constructing satellites and defense weapons, and they have government contracts for military vehicles. So these guys are
Really?
yeah.
I did
So
not
check
know that.
check them out. Pratt & Miller. You can go to their website, and the first thing that pops up is like all these tanks and then a Corvette. It's kind of funny. But those guys are what are really bringing that tech to the next level in racing, and then that trickles down
Right.
to the automobiles. And I don't see it as a classification thing, because if that was the case, what they would do is they would only build 50 of them. Mm-hmm. Just enough to get over the prototype law for the racing classes.
I don't think any car manufacturer, to my knowledge, especially not on the level of Chevy or Ford or one of those, is designing their production cars with the hopes that it's going to be a better racing platform. Because in most cases, when that car hits the racetrack, the limitations of the series that it's racing in have completely changed that vehicle anyway. It's no longer the car it's no longer even a semblance of the car that was
Right.
on the road. You've got some of the aerodynamic aspects to it, but a lot of it is just completely changed.
I gotcha.
Not in every series, but
Yeah.
it was absolutely the case in the case of NASCAR in the United States. That's exactly how it worked. Fords were winning at the track, then the dealerships were seeing a bump, and that's just not how it is anymore.
Right.
I was just curious.
No, absolutely.
They changed the design, and it seems like that design fits in a lot more of those races.
So with this performance, going back to the performance of the Corvette, one of the things you do get is the paddle shift, dual clutch transmission, 8-speed, I believe. You are not going to get a manual in this car, and that is so un-Corvette-like.
Yeah.
I mean, traditionally, the best vets have always been manual transmissions, and so if that's something that you're really expecting in the next Corvette and is a key performance component for you, that is gone.
I understand that motorsports are going that way. Of course, production cars are going that way. And as this horsepower and performance gets more and more and more out of control, for the dollar value, I think we're just going to see more and more of this. Manufacturers, again, they don't want to see their car smashed up on the side of the road. And one easy way to avoid that is to take the power management out of the hands of the driver and leave it to the electronics.
Specifically you.
Yeah, specifically me.
Especially you.
Why do you guys think they started building automatics
Right.
with these high horsepower engines?
They
like,
follow you on Facebook, and they're like, whoa.
We got to get a dual clutch for this idiot. He's dropped his third transmission this week. What on
That's
earth?
right.
And is that a turbo laying underneath it?
Mid-engine Corvette, if I said those words to you, would you think it was only 495 horsepower?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you start moving into that territory, the mid-engine sports car, it's not about the horsepower on the same level that it is on the roadsters. Right? The number is what matters. Again, I think this is kind of a callback to we don't care what the Corvette buyer thinks. We don't care what the Corvette fan thinks. This car's, it's going to be 495 horsepower,
Right.
mid-engine,
What gets me is there right now on the lot in 2019, there's a faster, or I should say higher horsepower Corvette right now, 755 horsepower.
Right. But I don't think that translates to a mid-engine sports car layout. we were talking about it earlier about how mid-engines handle a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
And we don't know if this had anything to do with this accident that supposedly happened with the new C8. But we were discussing earlier, anybody that's ever driven a mid-engine sports car, even if you're a big video gamer, you younger kids that play Gran Turismo and Forza, you whippersnappers, you guys have noticed that the handling characteristics are wildly different on a mid-engine car. And, once that horsepower gets up there and up there and up there, they get to be, a little slippery to handle.
Right.
Because they already want to drift on you when you jump off the gas a little bit, going around a corner. And I think that's only going to be increased. And that control problem is going to be increased by higher horsepower.
Right. Yeah, for those who haven't driven a mid-engine car or a rear-engine car, Porsche 911, the Lotus, like we were just talking about, if you go into a turn and you're on the throttle, what's happening is that weight is pushing, the weight of the motor and the force is pushing your car down and providing you grip. So when you go and you lift for any reason and you can't second-guess yourself mid-turn, because what happens is you lift off the throttle even a little bit. Now you are bringing understeer, which means the car is wanting to pull to the left or to the right, and the front of the car is wanting to pull to the left or to the right as opposed to the rear. Right. It's wanting to push off, and that's kind of what we believe happened, or we're just speculating. What happened in this accident was going around a turn. Whoever that was lifted, and the car started to push, and it pushed into the other lane. You have oversteer where the back of the car comes out. You have understeer where the front of the car provides all the grip and starts moving.
It is speculation, but I find it funny that when you said that, we were sitting there and you said, I wonder if he lifted. And I was like, oh, yeah. Yep. Because that's going to be the natural reaction of somebody that's never driven a car like that.
Right.
There's a semi pushing over the yellow lane and the yellow line, and you go, oop, I better get out of the gas. Whoops. There it goes.
And now you've pushed right into it.
Right. And we don't know. We haven't driven the car, but that's a performance mechanism of that type of vehicle. It's kind of hard to escape.
And it's something that GM has said that they've worked on, is really keeping that turn-in response perfect. And we'll see, right?
Right.
We'll see.
That guy's going to listen to this and be like, yeah, saying that was exactly it.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm suing GM. Whoa.
He's going to write us from Mexico, though.
Right.
He's long gone.
And we are speculating. Don't send your lawyers after us.
One thing I will say about, with the performance, let's talk about the suspension. We know that the higher end, the Z51 package is going to get the magnetic suspension, which means you'll be able to change it on the fly. What does that mean for the base Corvette? Are you going to just get a set of sports springs underneath it? Right. And if you do, and here's the thing for me, and this will be a great segment into the exterior of it. If you look at the photos that are coming out in publications, you see this car that is just sitting on its tire. Everything looks great. It's very hunkered down to the road. Right. But then when you see some of the more live action shots and the spy cars and things like that, you see this very large wheel gap in the back.
As you put it, a nice place for a Coke can.
That's going to be frustrating to me, is if the baseline has this spring that is so, jacked up to anticipate the torque of the mid-engine, just throwing that power down.
Well, going back to what we talked about, I feel like you need that performance suspension in order to handle this horsepower in this vehicle that can do these insane 60s. And you're telling me I got to pay more for it? Is that what I'm getting out of this?
Right.
I feel like it's a requirement, and they've already said there's 6 modes on the Z51. Which I don't know how many of those you're going to use, and I hope one of them's not an eco mode. But
it is without a doubt an eco mode. I will tell you that. There will be a comfort mode and an eco mode without a doubt.
Oh my goodness!
And those will be separate settings.
Is there anything more depressing than pulling up at a stoplight and hearing the brand new Corvette C8 next to you go? Shut off.
Hear the starter start up again.
It's not going away, Mike. Not anytime soon.
No, I don't think so.
Let's dive right into the exterior of this thing.
Yeah. It's ugly as Oh, sorry. Did I say that out loud? I meant to say it's as ugly as That is oh my God. Again, Okay, look, if somebody pulls up in that C8 and says, do you want to take it for a spin? Like we talked about earlier. Yep,
Of course.
I'm down. That car is amazing.
Right.
That's ugly. That car is hideous, and
Bryan,
I don't like
what do
it.
you think?
I'm going to have to see it in person. There's pictures I see, and I'm like, hey, that looks kind of good. And then there's other ones I'm like, wait, this is a vet.
Right.
You know, I'm not a huge fan of new vets.
Yeah.
So
To expand on it a little bit beyond, it's just as ugly. I guess the way I look at that is they don't photograph well often. We talked about that, when we were at dinner earlier. We talked about how often, performance vehicles don't photograph great.
Right.
And part of it's because of the camera angles they're trying to take, get more extreme camera angles,
Right.
thinking that makes the car look, more aggressive or whatever. But then you see them live, or you see them from, an actual person standing view, and it's like, wow, man, the lines on that thing are pretty good. The reason that I don't like the C8 is because I feel like they took a C7, pushed the cockpit forward, and left the rest of it as similar to the C7 as they could, and that is not a good line for a mid-engine car, in my opinion.
Right.
I do not like the way it comes off because there's no extension to the front end. It looks snub-nosed to me, and I referenced it as a ski jump in the last episode.
Yep.
It's just it's a wedge that goes up to the back end.
It does feel kind of like they took that ratio from the 80s of we need a cockpit interior with this cheese shape.
Right.
Look to it. I'll tell you, there is something though about cars that don't photograph well, and I feel like German cars do a really good job of this. If they're painted in silver and the car looks good, it will look good in every color.
Right.
But then there's those cars where you look at them and they only look good in yellow or they only look good in black. That is an ugly car. I can just tell you that right now. That is an ugly car. I guarantee it. Because you're going to walk out and look at it in the parking lot, and it's going to be like sunset, and the lines are going to look way different. You're going to be like, oh, crap, I bought that thing. So if it looks good in silver, that is your key that it's going to look good in any color.
Right.
And, looking at this thing, it just looks to me like they photocopied a very popular Italian car and put their logo on it.
Well, and this isn't a new hot take or anything. People are saying this all over the internet. But my actual first response to this car when I saw it, I already said earlier, I was like, wow, that's not a vet.
Right.
My other response was, well, that's a very cool new NSX. That is quite the automobile. That's not an NSX.
I think you put that in the show note with something along the
It's
line.
like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, that's an NSX. Oh, no, it's not. And a lot of people did that. A lot of people looked at it and thought, and that to me says this is a generic looking car from the outside, like we talked about earlier.
Well, so this brings up, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, so we still need to go into the competitors section of this. It brings up a good point, though, is I don't think people who are going to be in the market for a $150,000 car are going to go for the vet, strictly because I think the copycat factor is what's going to keep them from going to it. They, and I've talked to a couple of people who, like I said, have the money to go and buy this thing cash tomorrow, and they're like, it kind of looks like a Ferrari, it kind of looks like a McLaren, and to them, it's that. I won't even say it's a status symbol, but they just don't want it to look like something it's not.
Well, and that leads back into the douchebag factor, right? We've talked a lot about, some of these redesigned muscle cars, the Dodges that are on the road now, the Hellcats and stuff, and it's like there's something to guys that have the money and then guys that are trying to pretend to have the money,
right,
and now
absolutely.
they're running around in that thing, and I think you're going to see a lot of that in the Corvette. And it's not like I care one way or the other, but I'm just saying that will prevent, like you're saying, the $150,000 car buyer from looking at it if he goes, why is that tool with a mullet driving around in the car that I want? No thanks.
And we said this in the show notes, that the lower the price and the higher the performance, the more douchebags that are going to drive it.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Every car. This is not a Corvette thing. This is pony cars, pickup trucks. You'll get that horsepower up, and you can keep the price down. Yeah, forget it.
Yeah.
Do you think the horsepower going up, like they're talking about dual overhead cam engine ranges from 4.2 liter to 5.5 liters, twin turbo going on to them, do you think that'll change the mind of some of the guys? Like, do you think, hey, well, the 60,000 one is 495 horsepower and Mullet Man over here has it. But guess what? I just bought the 110,000 one, and I've got 1,000 horsepower sitting at the wheels.
I want everybody to know when he said mullet man, he put his hand out towards me, and I'm real offended.
He did. He's looking right at you, Mike.
It's because you said it, Mike. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
You know, I will say I don't think they will buy it. And this might be a stretch, but hear me out. I think the fact that they don't want to have to stop and talk to the douchebag in the $60,000 one at the gas station, they're going to be like, absolutely not. I'm not even getting anywhere near this brand. I'm good.
They'll be passing gas stations. Like, oh my God, is that a C8?
God, that's a C8 base. I gotta
here.
talk
Oh, look,
to this.
there's a Supra. Hey, what's going on, man?
Yep, exactly. You know, and looking at the Vet, it's a great car. But if I put my thumb over the badge right now and showed you a photo of it, you'd go, oh, that's the McLaren or that's a Ferrari.
Or any one of 100 other cars that are, mid-engine sports cars.
Yeah, that's the new Acura,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anything it could be.
I'm curious as to what the aerodynamics of it are, since we're on the performance and exterior kind of topic together. You know, are any of these vents, and of course the side ones are functional. I don't see any sort of a hood air movement, so there's nothing that's going to push the nose down. I'm a little worried about that.
No, that's where you put your carry-on and your laptop case, according to their media.
Well, back in where the golf clubs go, there's a spoiler that looks like it came off of a Camaro, so I'm not really sure how much that does either.
Right.
Obviously, these guys aren't going to design a car these days that doesn't have functional aerodynamics or would cause the car to misbehave on the road. But, I'm just looking at it, and nothing sticks out to me like it does with the Porsche, where you have, a spoiler that comes out and will fold up and will change its pitch on braking. I don't see any of that. And
I'll
maybe
give them
that's
the
the
benefit
difference
of the
between
doubt.
the $60,000 car and the $110,000 Porsche.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that that's because this entire car was designed in a wind tunnel to test out the entire body dynamic and reduce the need for all these, for all those specific aerodynamic pieces and parts.
All right, so we've talked performance, we've talked exterior.
Oh no, I was going to say the exterior is ugly as shit, but I already said that.
Hey, Mike, do you like the exterior of the Corvette?
I do not. I don't know why even. I can't even put my finger on what it is when I see it. That I'm like, yeah.
I'm really curious if anybody looks at this car and just goes, "That is one sexy car."
Oh, I guarantee you.
Do you think it's people who are 16, 17 years old?
I would imagine that, again, like we've talked about with some of these other designs, I imagine you'll find everybody under 30 thinks this is the most gorgeous thing they've ever seen, and everybody over 30 is kind of, meh, well. All right, let's move on to the interior of this thing.
Yes, interior. This is probably Mike's favorite part of the car.
All right, so I'm not a huge guy, but I'm 6'1", and a lot of the cars that I get into, I immediately, I go out and rent a car, or I'm, in a buddy's car or whatever, and I always find myself like, oh, yep, this was designed for somebody that's 5'10". I cannot help but look at the interior of the Corvette and go, there is no place for me in this car.
Right.
And one of the first things that I noticed about it and that I saw and people were ranting and raving about was that square steering wheel. Mm-hmm. Now, let me tell you, folks, square steering wheels are fantastic on the racetrack, okay? And, bow tie steering wheels. Those are fantastic on the racetrack. In your everyday driver, what happens when you turn into a parking spot at your local grocery store or at a car show that you want to park at?
Right.
You've got to spin that wheel and keep placing your hand on the wheel, and the C8's going to be no different. That'll be fun as you're trying to grab onto this wheel, spinning it in a parking lot. It's not a huge deal, but it's annoying to me that you can't just leave your hand on it and let it spin.
Do you know who really nailed this? Is Audi. When you look at theirs, they have the square bottom, but they have the round top and the round sides. Yeah. That, to me, I think is that perfect mix between a street steering wheel, a sports steering wheel, and a race car steering wheel.
Yeah, you might be right.
Whereas the square top and square bottom, I agree with you, Mike, and I never say that. I always try my hardest not to agree with you. Really crank on this wheel left and right, and you're shuffling around a turn, and the back end's kicking out or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's gonna suck.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next thing about the interior that I find just abhorrent. And you can find some videos and pictures of this, folks. Look at the center console on this C8, and man, I don't know where you're supposed to put anything. Your arm is going to hit it during that spinning motion of trying to spin the wheel around to get into a parking spot. You're going to be smacking it with your elbow.
Right.
You've got this shark fin that runs up to the dashboard. And I think we were talking about this earlier at dinner, and Matt mentioned, like, you know, these cars don't have to look like, you know, a fighter jet cockpit. I don't know why car manufacturers feel like if they're going to put a high-performance automobile on the road, they will all want to be driving in it like we're test pilots. You know, give me a nice, comfortable interior and let the car's performance speak for itself.
So to give the listeners a little bit of a background of why I say this, I feel like in the last year and a half, 2 years, we've come to this point with car interiors where we're mimicking more of the 1960s style. We have been able to, with safety innovations, minimize the dash. Previously, we had the dash really long out. We had a hide airbag in it. You had all the electronics. You had the AC, all the computer. You know, everything was hidden in this dash and on the firewall. And now we've gotten away from that, which is great. And now we're starting to get these like 1960s, real sleek and slender and simple dashes back. And I love that. I think that is such a great look. And for those who want to see what I'm talking about, just look at the 2020 Audi TT RS interior. And you have this just pushback dash that reminds me of the 1960s Italian cars. You have these round air conditioning vents. You have the square bottom steering wheel. That is what I look for in a car. And this is the comment that everybody's going to write the show about this week. You do not need a fighter plane cockpit to make it feel like a sports car.
Need a chair that hugs you nice, and
it's all about the seat. It's all about the steering position. It's all about the pedal layout.
Yep.
I feel like when you're driving a race car, it should feel like you're being hugged by the seat and you're not constantly having to support yourself or hold on to the steering wheel to give yourself, you know, something to fight back against the G's.
Right.
Anybody that's been in, you know, a real race car around a corner, or even a go-kart. You know, I raced go-karts for a while, and you know, your ribs would get beat to snot, right? Well, the most important way to fight back against that is a comfortable seat. I feel like putting all this stuff around the driver is just giving you more stuff that's in your way.
Absolutely.
While you're fighting G-forces and whatnot.
And people who look at the Corvette interior and say, oh, man, that's great. It looks just like a race car, has never driven a race car. Because that is the most inconvenient thing about a race car is you have the roll bar, you have the bracing under the seat, you have all these things that are in your way and that do hug you, but they don't hug you like a cockpit will.
Right.
They hug you almost, you know, in a negative way, but it is for your safety. But to drive every day in that position, in a straight back seat that doesn't recline, with a roll bar in your face, with the top 6 inches of your visibility cut out of the windshield, these are not fun things that a car manufacturer should try to duplicate.
To touch on that same topic, Formula One cars, people see that on TV and they go, that's what the interior of a race car looks like. No. That's what the interior of a race car looks like when you're trying to absolutely maximize horsepower, maximize aerodynamics, minimize weight, and the driver's comfort is number 0 on that list when designing the shape of the car. Right? So you're pinched in there like a sardine. But if you look at a rally car, you look at NASCAR, you look at any car that's got a normal body on it, or if you want to go to these mid-engine sports cars, look at, Le Mans, look at 24 Hours of Daytona. When those GT Series cars come out there, look at the cockpit. There's nothing around that dude. The steering wheel's sticking out, you know, far enough where he can reach it comfortably, and then he's got all his dash, you know, cluster of instruments around it, and then he's got all the room in the world to move around. They've got airflow coming over him and all those kinds of things. So it's a real misnomer to think that you need to be jammed in there in order to be comfortable.
Right. You know, I think a car that really does a great job, if you want to drive a car every day that has a race car interior, there is nothing better than a Lotus. I have sat in one, and they're a flat floor car, which means, you know, essentially take a pillow off your couch, throw it on the ground, and sit on it. And now where your feet are straight out as you're sitting on the floor, that is what it's like to drive a real race car. There's no floor to these things. These cars need to be inches off the ground. Your feet are level with your hips, which is an insanely uncomfortable way to drive, but that's what a race car is like. And if you look at the Elise and the Exige, you know, you have all these aluminum pieces around you, but the cockpit is relatively still open, because that is what a race car is like. It is not this just, you know, fighter pilot of controls
wrapped around your
wrapped
body.
around it. That to me is not appealing.
Yeah.
Those controls are pretty crazy too. Looking down that center fin or whatever, it's got 16 different buttons on it.
Yeah.
I have no idea what all those even do.
Yeah, it seems a little condensed.
And in real life, this might actually work well.
That's why you have a co-pilot.
I was going to say you have to drive with somebody else.
Yeah.
There's no nav system in it because there's no
Number
room for
2,
it. That's
roll
right.
down my window.
Exactly. And that console and that switch panel looks fine, but then in real life, I've seen photos of this thing, and it looks like that part's going to fall off. Like, it looks cheaply made and poorly held together.
The more I look at this, the interior of this, the more I don't like it. Again, I'm being awfully harsh on this car, but all the things that I've heard people raving about this car and raving about the interior, it's lost on me. I look at it and I just go, that's insanity. I feel like you're wedging somebody into a car where they're bound to be in a situation where they're cornering or something and bump their elbow on this console.
Right.
You know.
But we'd have to see it. We could sit in it and be like,
100%.
wow, I absolutely love this.
Right.
But from what we're seeing, I'm just like, no thanks.
We might fall asleep when we sit in it. We just, this
Right.
is great.
What is that I'm looking at?
That's the vet.
Oh my God. That is ugly as sin. Ooh, that's a bad angle for that thing, man.
Yeah, but see, to me, I bet that's way more close to what it's going to look like.
That looks almost like a Genesis front end, the coupe,
Hyundai.
with the headlights and how they are.
You can't talk bad about Hyundai in front of Mike.
Yeah,
I think the Hyundai looks a little lower too.
Yeah,
you
of
guys are
course.
mispronouncing it, and I think you're doing it on purpose.
I think I'm going to now, you always say the Veloster N. I'm going to flip it. I'm going to call it the V Nürburgring.
The V Nürburgring.
Let's kind of continue that conversation about its competitors and who's going to be buying this car. The other side of, not only are you going to see a bunch of wrecked ones, you're going to see a lot of repoed ones. And the reason I say this is people who are looking for a $40,000 or $45,000 car.
They're going to reach.
They're going to reach, and they're going to be like, "Oh, babe, this is the time. We can, if we buy this vet, I'll own it forever. Don't worry. We'll spend a little more money now and get it."
You know how good you'll look rolling down my window, babe?
Yeah.
On command. Hey, can you roll that window down?
Yeah.
Can't reach across.
Can
my
you turn the
chest,
turn signal on for me?
right? Can you hold the wheel while I reposition my hands to turn into this parking lot?
All right, it's going to have so many competitors, and you brought this up in the introduction episode, that is now competing with cars it has never competed with before.
Of course.
I guarantee you, Porsche was not happy to see this thing hit.
No, not even a little bit. I feel like Porsche has become a different auto manufacturer. That like I used to see a Porsche and it was a rare thing. Like, oh man, it's a Porsche. God, now they got the Porsche Cayenne and they've got all these other Porsche label vehicles that are pushing into other areas of the market.
For those who don't know Porsche's history, back in the 80s, it was still an air-cooled car, and then it switched to water-cooled in the late 90s, and that's when people feel like Porsche changed, because it went from a boutique builder to a large-scale sports car manufacturer.
Right.
And so
you've changed, man.
Yeah. The Jeep's gone through that. The Vet is going through this now. The Charger went through that when it came out. This is how this goes. The point is, now they have competition where they've never had it before, because that puts America on the map as a sports car builder.
Sure.
And so these are the two great takeaways for me on this car is we're making mid-engine cars more acceptable to society. This is what we want, and now a car manufacturer is saying, we can build that for you. And that's great. And I know for a fact, actually I don't, I am sure.
And that's the drop from this episode.
And
I don't know anything.
I'm going to edit all of this out. When Chevy announced that it was going to be a right-hand drive option available for the Corvette, I'm sure a lot of car manufacturers in Europe we're a little stunned because
Yeah.
now not only is this a mid-engine car that's competing on American soil for their traditional customers, this is now obviously going to go overseas.
Right. And I think it'll sell like hotcakes overseas.
They're going to look at it and say, what are they doing? What are they trying to do? That looks like a Ferrari.
I think a lot of it's going to come down to the interior. And I hate to say that. I don't think the exterior is going to be its problem in Europe. I think it will be build quality that is what's going to
Yeah, it could be.
make it successful
Especially
or not.
in, the German market.
Absolutely.
Yeah, where there's an expectation there.
Because the second that panel falls off while his wife's trying to roll down the windows from the center console, that's right.
That's the problem. It's competing with everything.
right.
They're capturing people in this price point that they can envelop a bunch of things. But I do think you are, especially if you're going to ship this thing overseas, you're dealing with the best that BMW, Mercedes, and Porsche have to offer. People that have an incredible amount of money aren't even going to bother with it, obviously. They're going to move on to the Ferraris and Lambos and things like that, right? So you're not going to see a bunch of these driving around in Abu Dhabi.
You're going to see them trying to get these on the two wheels like they do all their
Trying to
SUVs and
change
stuff
the
like that.
tires.
Yeah.
Those videos are insane, man.
That is crazy.
Those guys are a trip.
Brian, who do you think its biggest competitors are going to be?
I don't know. I'm kind of looking at it and I'm like what's the Porsche Boxster got towards it? Boxster has like way less horsepower. What did you say, 0 to 60 in 3?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
mean,
what they're saying.
Yeah, Porsche can't touch that.
I think it's going to be in its own little world. Everybody's going to have one. We're going to see them everywhere. You know what I mean? They're
And
going
we
to be going
saw
up
the C7
against,
everywhere, and it wasn't as unique.
Yeah, they're going to be going up against all the Mustangs and everything on the street, 0 to 60s.
I think if you look at it from a perspective of, it is hard to argue that for the consumer that can afford this car at $60,000, it does bring a lot to the table. It's got an awful lot of styling. We may hate it, but it's got an awful lot of styling, and its performance is relatively unmatched, at this price point. So, yeah, you may be right. We may see these things just crawling all over the streets like Challengers in a few years. I don't know.
Think about it. It's now going to give the average American who is going to retire and buy their retirement car, it's going to give them way more bang for their buck than they were ever able to purchase before.
Right.
Before they were looking at the Corvette and, 400 horsepower, target top convertible maybe, but it wasn't going to be something that really blew the doors off of anything.
But people moving towards retirement, like I know this, I spend a lot of time in Scottsdale, Arizona, and when you're down there, you see what people drive when they're moving towards retirement, and it's high-performance vehicles, but they're high-performance vehicles that are incredibly luxurious.
Yeah,
That's what
Mercedes
they're driving.
AMG, right, being the big one for
you drive up and down the parking lots in some of these places where the wealthy retirees hang out, and they're driving Maseratis and they're driving AMGs and they're and even Land Rovers and things like that. They're driving supremely quality cars, not necessarily for their performance specs. So I don't know if it'll capture that market, especially because, like we talked about, if you're 60 and trying to get in this car, you're never getting out of it. That's your tomb now. You can't get up.
So what they did with this
difficult to get in and
Corvette,
out.
they had this slender profile underneath the car. They did a dry sump pump on the motor so they could mount it lower. One thing they did is they ran everything through the tunnel. And so they have where the center console is underneath the car is essentially this tunnel that runs the length of the car. And that's where they have all their controls and electronics and all the bits that they didn't want to stick under the car. And the reason for that is they didn't want to create, this drop-in that traditional sports cars have, I think, to try to tailor to that older market.
Maybe.
But I can tell you this. A Hellcat, which starts at $60,000 as well, has a pretty quick, not as fast 0 to 60, but is easy modification wise to get to a faster time. That's an easier car to get in and out of. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
The same with the Camaro. That's why I'm saying they might be losing some of their older baby boomer crowd to the pony cars because they're easier to get out of, and they have that ratio of power in the front sent to the rear that they grew up with. It's the traditional muscle car that they look for. Again, Corvette was never a muscle car. To me, it was always a sports car. But, I never thought we'd see a Mustang with an independent rear suspension either.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you may be right. we'll see what happens with it.
I do think this is not going to create a price war. I do want to say that. I don't think you're going to see Porsche dropping the prices of their cars. I don't think you're going to see that with Mercedes or Audi or anybody else. I do think it's going to spur a 0 to 60 war.
You may be right.
To where
I agree.
You know,
Where
they're going
other auto manufacturers feel like they've got to push up their performance to deal with this.
Right, and I don't even think in the horsepower side. I think it's strictly on that 0 to 60 time, because that's still something you can take out to the street, do 0 to 60 and still be legal.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a 0 to 100 time. I think the focus is going to shift to that 0 to 60.
Yeah.
And if you can make 380 horsepower do it faster than the Corvette C8, done.
And to that point, when, you know, I've driven on the roads long enough, I still love to punch it and really get a car moving. I go and rent something and I find out how fast does it get to 60. Ooh, that's fun.
Right.
And then I back off because I don't want to get arrested on the highway. So
Right.
you're exactly right. When I'm driving around in something, every stoplight, I'm, you know, making sure that I'm parked in a lane where there's no one next to me, and then bam, see how
Right.
fast that thing goes.
Yeah.
If you can do that, you know, in 3 seconds over and over again, that's kind of fun.
But what's going to happen when Audi puts out a TT that does 0 to 60 in 2.7 with less horsepower or a turbocharger and puts it at a $60,000 price point? Or
I'll buy
70
a TT. Ooh, did I just say that?
Well, that's the cheerleader in you.
I know Bryan will buy a TT.
No, it's the RS3 that I want.
Oh, is it the
Yeah.
RS3?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good choice.
Yeah, that's the
Good
one I
choice.
want.
Yeah.
What are the starting price on those?
I think it's 65
Okay.
for the RS3.
No, there you go.
You can find a chip.
For about $1,800, you can run an E85 tune and get it up to 500 horsepower and 500 foot-pound torque all-wheel drive.
Right. So this is a brand new Audi. You have
And
58.
this is an Audi that already does 4.1, right?
Right. Right.
Right.
That's a good point to bring up. This is
before this tune.
Yeah.
right. This is an Audi all-wheel drive, brand new RS3 at $58,000. With Bryan's tune, let's say $2,000. You have a shop put it in, probably another
800, 900 bucks.
Okay, so now you're right at Corvette price. You know that thing's going to have a faster 0 to 60 than the Vet.
I don't know if it'll have a faster 0 to 60, but I know it'll be a more comfortable car to drive. It'll be a better interior.
Without a doubt.
As you said off air, you can throw Blizzaks on it and drive it back and forth to work, and you don't have to worry about, you know, wrapping
Right.
it around a bowl.
No, that's the
So-
thing is in Colorado, if you have a sports car, it's a 6-month car. You have
6.
Well,
First of all, you can't drive it in the summer because it's going to get hailed on. You can't drive it in the spring because it's going to get hailed on. You can't drive it in the fall because it's going to get hailed on. You can't drive it in the winter because, well, it's the winter.
Right.
So
Yeah.
don't drive sports cars in Colorado.
So you have
Let
3
me drive
days. You have 3 days to drive this car.
Yeah.
I think that's why you see a lot of soft top Jeeps in Colorado as well, is because if you have a hard top like mine, you never take it off.
That's
ever.
right.
You can't.
That's right.
It's going to rain at some point. It's going to.
We need to make a video of that sometime. You trying to hoist your Jeep top
Yeah.
up to the roof in the shop here. He over-engineers it a little bit. He goes at it a little hard, and
like
you know,
everything,
it looks like a problem.
just like Mike's mom.
I'm literally I'm literally standing there next to the man going,
Yeah.
"Hey, do you want to just remove this thing like adults with 2 people and
Well-
take it off?" And he goes, "No, I want to test this 4-hour system I have with chains that link the damn thing to the roof like some sort of it's like an S&M dungeon for cars back there. It's a horrible situation." And he just makes us all stand around and watch. Oh, okay, we can help. We can make this easier, but
What the guy with the 20 IQ across from me forgot was the
don't
part
talk about Bryan like that.
was the part of the conversation where I said, "That's a great idea for you to help me get the top off, but where are you going to be tomorrow when I need to get it back on?"
Well, considering I was your neighbor at the time, I wasn't
I
going
don't
to be
think you
far
were.
away.
I think you had already moved away and abandoned us.
Oh.
You know.
Uh-oh,
And
here comes
abandon
the,
us.
can we get a
Again.
violin sound effect for this?
Well, you're
Hulk
back.
walking away music?
You're back now, Mike, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess we're glad. So next up on the show, we're going to cover one of our segments we talked about in the introduction episode, which is predictions they got wrong. We have a lot of magazines from the old days, and we dig through them and always find somewhere or something that somebody predicted and was terribly off. Bryan has this week's regarding the mid-engine Corvette. But this is them talking about it back in 1971 on Road and Track.
So this reads, the mid-engine Corvette isn't the only exciting project underway at Chevrolet Engineering, but it's the one we'll see in production first.
Which, 50 years later.
Yeah. That's a while from 1971.
Yeah, it was definitely the one we saw first.
That's about right.
Not.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Wow.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty cool stuff from Chevy from 1971 before we saw a mid-engine Corvette.
How much of the war for the car dollar is just coming down to fanboyism, where you buy that manufacturer and now it's your manufacturer? It's the old Ford versus Chevy thing where it's like, I'd never drive a Ford, boy. Is it that same thing?
Absolutely. You look at how a dealership makes their money, and they make it off return customers.
Yeah,
they make it off
incessantly after you buy a vehicle.
Right, and then they want your lifetime service record with it as well.
Yes.
They want to have you bring it to the dealer all the time. So I think so. I grew up, in an area where you were either a Chevy or a Ford guy.
Yeah.
And I've never been that way myself. I've always just been a car guy. I don't care if it's a tuner, a muscle car, a diesel truck. I just want to go fast. If it can't go fast, I just want it to be fun. If it can't do those, make a cool noise.
Hey, notice what he never mentioned there, and this
that?
will become a recurring theme.
Uh-oh.
He never cares whether anything's reliable. He's like, is it fun? Does it four-wheel well? Oh, well, yeah, the wheels will fall off. That's fine.
It's amazing I'm not single. That is.
Yeah, it's an expensive way to live.
You're absolutely right. I can never say I've looked at something and thought, first and foremost, this needs to be reliable.
Right.
I guess, yeah, that's where I've gone wrong my whole life.
I guess it's just the business I've been in my whole life. It's like, that thing has to get 200,000 miles out of it or it's not worth the money.
Well, that's the end of the podcast. I hate cars now, so thanks, Mike.
Yeah, you're welcome. I knew I could do something with this.
All right, so the big question about the C8, and to kind of end this episode off, is would you buy it? If you had $60,000 in your pocket right now.
I'm going to say I'd have to see it, I'd have to drive it, and then I could make my decision whether I want to buy it.
Wow.
Going off of what
Are you going to run for office next?
Yeah.
Jesus, that was the most political shit I've ever heard in my life.
But as of right now, if I had $60,000, I think I'd have to go buy a RS3.
And chip it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, of course. Audi.
Yeah. I love them.
I know. That's fine. We all have our car company.
Right.
For Mike, it's Daewoo. For Bryan, it's Audi.
Daewoo.
Wow.
He's got that TV too.
Right. And for Matt, it's whatever breaks first. That's what he likes to drive.
What can try to kill me first?
So for me, would I buy a Vet? Now, I'm biased because I raced karts, and the Vet can't compete with a kart, as it turns out. If you guys ever want to test that, find somebody that's got a high-performance kart, and I challenge you to get the same excitement out of a car in your life. 60, 75 in a go-kart feels like now I've never been in the cockpit of a Formula One car or an Indy car, but I have been told by people who have that it's as close as you're going to get, because the feeling of speed, the feeling of G-force, the feeling of control is only challenged by the absolute upper echelon of motorsports. For your average dude, that's the only way you're ever going to get close to it. So for me, it's hard for me to compare cars to kart racing. Right. So, if you ask me what would I buy instead, well, I'd buy the hauler and the truck and 2 karts and a season's worth of tires and fuel for what the C8 costs. But would I buy the C8? No way. Right. I'm not going to buy the C8. There are a million other cars I like out there. Again, as we discussed earlier, I'm not a Corvette fan, but to me, it feels like a generic. As scary as that is to say, people are going to be like, a generic? Yep, it feels like a generic mid-engine sports car that they're pushing at this price point so people can touch it. And I'm just not going to be that guy. Right. I'd rather drive around in a C7, honestly.
I'm in the same boat. It's definitely not a popular opinion, and all it will take is getting us around a racetrack in it. Maybe we'll all come back and be wearing Corvette T-shirts afterwards. For me, it's the Supra. right now, anything in that near price range, as you guys know, I am geeking out on that car. And I don't care.
He promised to sell his wife earlier? That was really weird. I didn't think that was really necessary.
I said
be like,
your wife.
Oh.
We're selling you your wife.
Sorry. No, I could see the confusion.
Yeah.
There comes a time when a car guy, and this is coming from a hot rodder, and it's hard to even say these words, where 0 to 60 or horsepower, all that is just a number. And if it is not a blast to drive, or if it stresses you out like some of the mid-90s sports cars did, that you always felt like it was going to break and kill you, it's just not fun. And for us as a driving podcast, the car needs to be fun first and foremost. And I've driven slow cars that are a blast. One of the most dumb, enjoyable cars I've ever driven was a Charger. It made the dumbest noise in the world. Yeah. It had no power, but it was fun.
And it makes you giddy.
Exactly.
It's like, this is just fun.
Exactly. And for me, the Supra's that car. I understand that it's 0.8 of a second slower or 0 to 60, but when I go out to that in the morning in the garage, I will be more happy than if there was a vet there.
Right.
And that's my opinion. Who I think the car is for, I think it's for those who have been long-time vet fans and really are embracing the change that is coming. I think that it's for the younger generation of drivers who, grew up in the video game era and expect this kind of performance out of a car.
I don't think the classic Corvette guys are gonna like it at all. It's gonna be.
I agree.
They're gonna segregate themselves out at the car shows and be like, "Do not park with us over here. You C8 guys, stay over there."
I am curious to see what kind of people it brings to the brand.
Are we going to see this in a rap video?
A rap video? Oh my god! Is there not a rap video already on the internet with the C8? God, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what these C8s turn into. Because, like you said, they're going to be disposable hot rods for a lot of people.
Right.
People with enough money, they're just going to destroy these things.
Yeah. I think they're perfect for the guy who is looking for a retirement car. Right, and is maybe not in that price point of the $150,000 NSX or the Porsche 911, and this is going to be his chance to get that sense of speed and performance that he would normally not be able to get.
I suppose you're right. I don't think of people as buying a retirement car as a performance car. I get what you're saying. Yeah. Like that guy hits that age where he's like, "Oh, I've worked hard my whole life and I've made all this money, and now it's time for me to spend it on something fun. So I'm going to go out and buy a C8."
Yeah.
I think your priorities change a lot by the time you're that age.
Yeah, but price being one of the biggest ones because they're on a fixed income or they're living off of their savings.
Or your back hurts and. You're scared that your cataracts are gonna.
Here's why I'm not
interference
worried.
with your vision while you're going around corners.
I'll tell you, this is why I'm not worried or concerned about that. Is because like photo 2 of the C8, it was of the damn golf clubs in the back.
Right.
This wasn't it going around 100%. A racetrack. It was like, here it is in a garage, and look at these golf clubs you can put in.
Can I say something about that top going into that little trunk area?
I can say
whatever I want. That's right. And you can try to edit it out later, but, lack
Mike,
of knowledge.
You can email your complaints at matt@thedrivingstandard.
Oh, okay, that was an actual email address. Usually it's something followed by goyourself.com or something.
No, I know.
Anything else? Peanut gallery?
On to our next segment. Every episode we're going to do bad car advice, right? So we're going to be helping out Tiffany today. Okay, Tiffany has a ringing sound coming from underneath her seat, and she said when she puts her hand underneath it when she's driving, the ringing goes away. So Tiffany, my thought process here is you have a spring loose. Every once in a while on older cars, the springs will pop loose and they'll make like a jingling sound. My advice to you, Tiffany, is just pull the seat out. Okay? Think about this. That ringing will go away. You'll lighten the vehicle, so you'll get better performance, better gas mileage. Now, if you do need something to sit on, I recommend a 5-gallon bucket. This is an old hot rodders trick. Not only is it lighter weight, but it's also used to collect your body parts when you crash because you didn't have a seatbelt on. So that's my advice.
If you're hearing
it's
a
a
ringing
win-win.
from under your seat, Tiffany, I suggest that you reach under your seat and grab your Galaxy S10 from under there, because that's your boyfriend trying to figure out where you are.
Right. What's that noise?
It's actually
It's your
ringing. Ring, ring.
Right.
Some sound effect.
Yep.
She hits the mute button
Right.
or the button to silence it.
Not
when
now.
she
I'm trying to find this ringing noise.
Right. Let's be honest. Her ringer is a T.I. song, and everybody knows it.
What you know about that?
Yeah. No,
know
I
all
celebrate his whole collection. Yeah.
Poor Bryan.
Rush.
I've got to go. This
You
show's
guys
got
are good.